I'm ready.
All right. You ready?
Yes.
All right.
Oh.
All right. Hello. Insert nickname here. We will come up with a nickname sometime, I promise you. Thank you for joining us today. This is Not Your Mother's Sex Ed, where we provide educational content for all things sex and sex related for almost all ages. My name's Kristen. My pronouns are she, her.
And I'm Michelle. My pronouns are also she, her.
Hello, Michelle. How are you today?
Oh, I'm so very tired. I know you can attest to that feeling.
So much. It's funny. I don't think anybody who listens to us knows this, but we actually talked for like a solid hour before we even started recording this. But we make a point of just not asking how we are.
Yeah.
We get onto the show that way. We've got some warm up talks we can use.
Yes. It was pure business. Now we're here for pleasure.
Business. Now we chat for pleasure. Yeah. Why are you so tired? What you been up to?
Well, so my van life blog is going well. It's off and doing its thing. We have Facebook, Instagram. That is a bus named Lulu. Please go check it out and follow it.
Check it out.
So her floor is going in right now. And that's a huge chunk of time and energy, but it's coming along and I'm excited.
And remind me, you're doing all this yourself, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, pretty much. Like, I'm not taking it to professionals to do it.
Yeah.
So I'm getting help where I can. I've had some pretty good help from my family and some friends and stuff, so that's been great.
That's good.
So that's tiring. And then my poor cat, you know Ziggy, he's 18.
Ziggy, old man zigzag.
Yes. Well, we don't really know what happened, but I think it's an abscess tooth. His face, all the way from like his mouth to up under his eye, like his cheek was like poking up kind of through his, got super swollen.
Poor guy.
Yeah. And so I take him to the vet and we decide to just clip and clean it, drain it, give him some antibiotics.
Sure.
And I was expecting having to put him under anesthesia for a dental at some point, and so they did his blood work to see if he was healthy enough to go under anesthesia. And he is. So
that's actually pretty amazing given his age. I work at a vet clinic and I don't know many 18-year-old cats that could confidently be put under anesthesia. So go Ziggy.
Yeah, so my vet was pretty confident. But they did say that he has a heart murmur. And I guess it has to be a pretty minor one if they're letting him go under.
Yeah, it must be.
Yeah. And then she's suspecting some maybe other heart problems related to that. He's in stage 2 renal failure. And she thinks he is hyperthyroid.
I could see that. He's a big boy.
And he's old. Like, it's an old cat thing.
It's just, things stop working after a point in time. It's just kind of life.
So she's confident he can go under to have the abscess looked at. I am at this point not sure if I want to go through with that. It's all going to come down to how his face heals now.
Right.
Because if it heals fine and he seems good, the weird thing about it is obviously, like, he's not very happy right now. Like, he has an infection, his face hurts, he's tired from eating. So he looks rough. But up until this, my cat has had the same appetite his entire life. He drinks the same. He pees the same. He poops like, I was looking up the hyperthyroid symptoms, and there was really, like, nothing that I was like, "Oh, my cat, like, has this wrong with him."
For sure has this, yeah.
He, like, is getting a few mats in a couple places. But, like, he's 18 and we already know he has, like, his hips are not great. So I know that he can't, like, get the very center of his back anymore.
Right.
He can't lick immediately under his chin anymore. But, like, otherwise he completely grooms himself. Um,
Which again, for an 18-year-old cat is pretty darn good.
yeah. So it's one of those things where it's like, I mean, he's doing pretty good. The vet didn't think so. But when she asked me, she's like, is he having more bad days than good days? And I was like, this is his first bad day since he had seizures 4 years ago.
Right? You're like, he's doing great.
Yeah.
He's fine.
Yeah. So we're at least gonna go through our antibiotics, make sure everything heals up. If it doesn't heal up, that's a different story. But then we'll see how far the dental goes. Uh, See if maybe I can get a friend to get me into their job for a discounted dental.
Or a cheap dental. That friend could probably do it. That friend
Yeah,
would feel super guilty if your 18-year-old cat didn't make it through the surgery, though. Just
no.
throwing that out there.
I was actually surprised that the vet offered to put the cat under anesthesia. Like,
Impressive, yeah.
yeah, I point blank, like, because she was like, these are your options. She gave me four. And two of them involved putting the cat under anesthesia for a dental. And I had to stop her and I'm like, wait a second. What is the likelihood that this cat can make it through anesthesia? And
Through anesthesia, yeah.
she's like, oh, it should be pretty good. Like, I'm not expecting any issues. We'll give him like a IV catheter and fluids when he's like under, and that, he'll wake up more easily. And then this other anesthesia. I was like,
Great.
okay.
Let's do it to it.
Yeah. So that's in a nutshell what's going on with me. And then tell me about your exciting news.
Oh, so life's been chaotic. I got home less than 3 weeks ago from like a 2.5, almost 3 week trip. So we took a cruise with our in-laws. We left out of Dover, England, and sailed through the English Channel up through the North Atlantic to Iceland. We spent 4 or 5 days in Iceland and then took the boat down to Scotland, Ireland, Northern Ireland, and Wales, and then ported back in Dover and then came home. So we were gone the 6th through the 22nd. So it was a long trip, super fun. Didn't get to spend a whole lot of time in Scotland, Ireland, or Wales, but Iceland is the most beautiful place that I've ever been in my life. And I got some fun things in Iceland that I will show you in future episodes. But I do think you'll be proud to know that while in Iceland, in Reykjavik in specific, I did visit the Icelandic Phallological Museum, which holds the record for the world's largest display of phalluses. So,
Love it.
in future episodes, I have so much to share about that. But it was really fun. It was a fun trip. But, there's a reason why they say people need a vacation from their vacation. So, but I came home and within 48 hours of being home, I was starting a new job. I've officially been sworn in. I'm now a deputy coroner for the county that I live in. And that has been just a wild roller coaster of a ride. I've touched a little bit on like the testing and stuff I had to do to get into the job in previous episodes, but like it's my job now. I'm sworn in. I took my oath. I have my badge. Like I've been going out to scenes and assisting in autopsies and it's good, but it is a 24-hour job. Like, people don't just die 9 to 5. So it's been interesting, but I'm loving it. It's probably some of the most fulfilling work that I've ever done. But it's been hard too. There's been some tough cases that we've been on. So um, a lot of like mental health stuff that goes into it, but it's been good. And I'm still working pretty close to full time at my job at the vet clinic as well. So I'm just rolling 7 days a week, 24 hours a day for the last 3 weeks, and I am exhausted. So if you're wondering where this really sexy, like hoarse voice came from, and just these really nice pillowy bags under my eyes, and the fact that I'm not wearing makeup and I'm slumped in this chair, it's because I'm exhausted.
That time. It's that time.
But it's been an adventure. I will have so many stories to tell you the next time we get together.
I'm so excited for it.
But yeah, so that's kind of been my life. It's just waiting through that chaos. So you also notice I'm upstairs today. I am not filming from the office. I'm the only one home at the moment, and I have to make sure that the dog doesn't eat through any of our furniture. So if we get any guest appearances from any of the pets, I do apologize beforehand. The dog is loud. She loves her squeak toys. And the cat loves to just show his butt to the camera. So just for you and the audience going forward, just be aware.
Some kitty butthole that we have to blur out.
It's her. He's just, you know, Winston, the cat, he really appreciates that high level of intimacy. So, but guess what? What a
What?
perfect transition. Do you know what we're talking about today?
What are we talking about today?
Today we are discussing the various different types of intimacy. So we'll be busting some intimacy myths. We'll be giving you some ideas on how to achieve more intimacy in all of your relationships, but intimacy is definitely kind of the core topic here. So
Awesome. I'm actually really, really excited for this episode. I had so much fun researching it, and if you're listening or watching, you might not think intimacy is something that you have to research, but I guess the point is that we're not experts, and so we want to make sure we're giving you good information. So I had at the time of my life researching for this episode.
it's fine. It really, there's some interesting stuff out there. And there's ways to think about it that, don't by default just kind of come to mind. So I think it'll be good. I think it'll be a really good, informative, maybe emotional, maybe funny kind of episode.
Okay, so back to intimacy.
Intimacy, the intimacy of our private lives. Oh, I'm screaming. Oh, I almost knocked over my ring light. It's fine. Everything's fine.
We're good. We're golden. Okay, so I found a couple definitions of intimacy because I feel like we all know what intimacy is, but I wanted something a little more concrete than just kind of a feeling. So it's defined as like a closeness, um, close familiarity of friendship. So yes, it is involved in all of your relationships, not just your romantic one, or something of a personal nature. So a lot of it comes back to like being vulnerable, sharing parts of yourself, creating a close connection.
Mm-hmm.
But intimacy really comes down to it at its core, which I think, honestly, most people seem to just associate it with,
Like romantic partners.
yeah, romantic partners,
Mhm.
sexuality, like that. And it's so much more than that.
No, I agree. I like the idea that you said it involves vulnerability. And I think that's really like the core of intimacy. Do you think it's possible to have an intimate relationship without ever showing vulnerability?
So when I was researching this, and this is kind of, I was all up in my feelings and I was like warm and fuzzy when I was reading about this. because I realized that my biggest frustration with any of my friendships or relationships or whatever the case may be is a lack of intimacy. Like, it was kind of cool to put that into, I guess, words.
Sure.
And that made me realize that that's a that you need that made me realize that you need the vulnerability
Mhm.
to feel close, to feel safe with someone.
Yeah.
And that's the piece where when I get frustrated that I feel like a relationship's not being intimate, it's because I feel like we're kind of just disconnected, and there's just like some kind of barrier there.
Right. Yeah. No, I agree. I think even if you don't have the vulnerability in the relationship, I think that it is important to have the safety to have that vulnerability. And I think if
Yeah,
you don't have that, then I don't think it can be classified as intimate. But it's
yeah,
interesting because it's such a subjective term too, like the closeness, like familiarity, vulnerability, etc. Like that, it's such a subjective thing that I think a million different people would answer it a million different ways. But
I'm actually, if you're willing to share, I would love to hear some of the things that like spark intimacy with you in any of your relationships, if you're willing to share.
honestly, probably my biggest one is my ability to cry. Like, if anybody has ever seen me cry, like, that by default is a pretty intimate relationship because I'm not a crier. But for instance, like, 90% of the people in my life would be like, "Oh, yeah, I've never seen Kristen cry at all." If you ask my husband, I cry at least once a week. By default, at least once a week. And that touches back on the vulnerability, like, I need to be able to cry with you. And then I'd say the other thing, especially recently, is that because, like, I'm still in the midst of, like, a recent adult ADHD diagnosis, and I'm still very much learning how to live with that, and I am learning more about myself and learning about the diagnosis. A huge part of the vulnerability is being able to talk with somebody about that and, the struggles and the difficulties that go along with that. So for me, it's all very much like a freedom to express things that I feel like I can't necessarily express to just anybody out on the street.
Mhm.
What about you?
I feel I feel warm and fuzzy when I talk about this because I don't know, and I think this speaks to kind of my friendships and where I'm at in my life right now. But I am one of the most like I am a close physical touch kind of person. So one of my like favorite memories is something so simple, and it's with my best friend from high school, one of my best friends from high school.
Sure.
We This was 2005, right? We would lay on her bed on our stomachs and we would have a magazine open and we would just like flip through the magazine, or like we'd sit side by side and we'd flip through the magazine, or we'd pull up her laptop and watch videos,
Right.
and always just sandwiched together. And even now as adults, when I go over to her house, if she sits on the same couch as I do, she's almost almost always touching me or like an inch away from touching me at all times. And I love physical closeness with my friends. And so that just makes me warm and fuzzy. Like I love it so much. Or I really like being able to talk about really, really niche things.
Yes.
I don't think we've touched on this in any of our episodes so far, but maybe we did. Maybe we did actually. But I love Bigfoot,
Oh.
love the paranormal,
Yeah.
love cryptids. And you can't talk about that with everybody because they'll think you're crazy.
They laugh, it was so dumb.
Yeah. And it's like, Like, there's a lack of, like, I don't want people to think I'm stupid, you know?
Sure.
It's coming from a place of, like, knowledge seeking. Um, I don't want people to think that I'm, like, a nut job, I guess. Like,
Oh, that Michelle.
but it's so much fun to talk about. And
Oh, it's
I don't
so fun to
feel,
talk about.
yeah, and so it's those conversations where when I get to talk about it and just like gush about it, that I feel really close to the person that I'm talking with,
Sure.
because I feel a lot of times that I don't get to gush. Like, you know, for whatever reason, I don't feel comfortable like gushing and just being a weirdo.
Yeah. But even that I think goes back to vulnerability. Like you're able to just be you without the worry of somebody judging you or thinking you're stupid. Like I will tell you, my fondest memories, like anytime I think about our relationship, like you and I, my fondest memories, despite all of the cool shit that we've done together, is just watching ghost shows with you. Like my favorite. It makes me so warm and fuzzy. And I talked about it so much that even my 12-year-old kid, when you came over, was like, I want to watch a ghost show with you. Like it is my favorite activity. And even when you moved far away, we would occasionally do like a digital date and we'd just like try to watch it. Like it just, and we'd sit there and we'd make fun of Zach Bagans. And it's a delight, you know?
It absolutely is. And that's another big one for me is honestly just like doing nothing with someone. Like just sitting and
Mhm.
just going on about whatever it is, ranting about some ghosts and some ghost hosts and
Toast toast.
um
I would
or this
even say like, and you can correct me if you think differently, but I think a lot of people associate intimacy also with like things of a sexual nature. So not just romantic, but like things of a sexual nature. And like, let's be honest, we're doing a podcast right now called Not Your Mother's Sex Ed, and the types of things that we discuss on this show, I think like by default, people would be like, wow, they must have a pretty intimate relationship. But like I don't find these conversations between the two of us to be intimate at all. Like, I
yeah,
think our time just sitting and watching Ghost Adventures is far more intimate than sitting here and discussing like sex with you.
yeah, I would wholeheartedly agree. This is so anytime this is so specific. So I'm going to start by saying why I got to this point.
Okay.
Because for me, I am generally, I want to consider myself a free spirit. I want to use that term uh, because I'm not really bothered by a lot,
Right.
but because I'm not bothered by a lot, and for anybody listening or watching, I'm neurodivergent. We haven't quite figured out why or how or what.
Somehow. Yeah.
Um, so I spend a lot of my time trying to make sure other people feel comfortable and that I'm doing what is socially acceptable. Um, which means I might be comfortable taking my clothes off in front of somebody else,
Yeah.
but other people might not be comfortable with me taking my clothes off in front of them.
Oh, absolutely.
Anytime I get a green light from a friend to do something that I consider a normal everyday thing to do
Hmm.
is my favorite. Like, so I don't know if you saw it on Facebook, but Kristen and I did a topless photo shoot for the podcast.
It was great.
It was fabulous. And we had paint on us, and we're just being able to be in a space. And it wasn't even sexual in nature at all. You know,
Oh,
like
not
we're
at
not
all.
in a sexual nature. Just being comfortable enough to be around somebody where you're just like in the kitchen, like, tits abound.
Yeah. It's abound. It's to the breeze.
um, it was just, nice. It was just like, this is me in my natural existence.
Mhm.
Like, I live with somebody. Like, this is how I am when I'm by myself at home. And
Yes.
so, like that with somebody else is intimate of itself. So, or even like when somebody feels comfortable enough to like pee with the door open, you just like, it's this moment of like, oh my gosh,
Oh,
we really are friends.
it's
Like,
very true though. You bring
yeah.
up a really interesting point too, though, because you mentioned before that you're neurodivergent and you're still trying to kind of figure out exactly how, but you are. And I clearly am neurodivergent. I'm pretty severely ADHD, and so and I know that there's so many people out there who are neurodivergent in one way, shape, or form. On the autism spectrum, ADHD, anything like that. When you think about intimacy, it's so easy to be like, oh, well, if you hug somebody or if you kiss somebody or if you could be naked around somebody, like that's an intimate relationship, or if you can talk about your deepest secrets, that's an intimate relationship. But you really can't define it that way because there are so many different people out there. For example, I have a friend who's autistic, and for them, like the most intimate thing that they will do around somebody is like eat around them, or
Mm,
like
yeah.
so many things that where we may take that behavior for granted every day and be like, well, I do that around strangers all the time, why is it intimate? Whereas for somebody who's neurodivergent, like that might be an incredibly intimate behavior. And so a huge part of intimacy is learning what intimacy means to the other people around you.
If you if you can catch me being silly, like just being silly, that is one of the most intimate things you can like that's the most intimate situation you can probably find me in, because that isn't strictly a me and my family behavior.
Yeah.
And so if you can stumble upon that moment, then that is like next level intimacy, which you wouldn't think, like,
Feel like I'd be naked in front of you before I was silly in front of you.
like
Yeah.
absolutely.
That is the crux of intimacy though. Like that, and that's why we're having this episode, is because it's so much different than what I think people think that it is.
Right. And I will say that that is actually because I don't think that you were the same way, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like you lean into your silliness
Mhm.
much more than I do.
Very much.
And so some of my favorite memories of us are just moments where you've been silly. Because my brain is like, oh, she's being silly. That means she's
That's
open.
intimate.
Yeah, even though it's not, because it's my thing, not yours.
Which is funny because, yeah, for me, like, probably the more intimate times of our friendship is when, I'm sad or grumpy or, I'm just like, whatever, like, we need to go, we need to get this done, like, let's and I'm not being funny and I'm not being silly. Because for me, being, like, funny, being the funny one and being the silly one is how I've always dealt with, like, uncomfortable social situations. When I don't know what else to do, I'm like, I'll make people laugh. Like, I'll make up a stupid song or, I'll make an uncomfortable joke. And so when I'm doing that, I'm like, oh yeah, that's just everyday Kristen. But when I'm, having my real bitchy days with somebody, I'm like, that's intimacy. Like,
Oh, such a wild thing. So I, when I was researching kind of what to talk about today to make sure I hit all the major points, I assumed that there would be like, like a 12-step program, um, the 8 planets in our solar system, whatever, like there would be categories. You're like, no, I don't.
yeah. I got the 12-step program, but then you said the planets in our solar system, and I was like, do I know what you're talking about? I get it. The categorization, I get it now.
back on track. So there are 5 categories. I found some places that said there were 4, but I liked the 5 one that I found. So we're sticking with 5.
I'm here for it.
They're overarching categories. So within each category, you can divide it up and divide it up and divide it up and be super nuanced about it. But most of us consider physical intimacy as kind of the end all be all of intimacy, right?
Right.
So that would be sexual acts, physical closeness, maybe you're cuddling, maybe you're making out, holding hands, pillow talk, those kinds of things are usually what people consider to be intimate.
Mm-hmm.
Not the only one. And interestingly enough, neither Kristen nor I mentioned any of those things when we were just talking about the most intimate things.
It just goes to show, I think if you got down to it and you ask people like what the most intimate things are for them, very few of them are going to say sexual relations of any kind.
Yeah, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us down below. What are the things that you find most intimate? Because
Right.
I'm dying.
What are your intimacy turn-ons?
Yeah, tell us.
Yeah.
So then next up would be emotional intimacy.
Which are my biggest ones, I think. Those are the ones I really like glom onto.
Yeah, so like sharing your feelings, letting that barrier down, being willing to have people see you sad, see you happy, experience those things with you. Spiritual intimacy is actually one that until I read about it, I didn't realize I appreciate. But then I read about it, I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually something that I don't open up to people a lot about. And when I have, it's been super rewarding.
Yeah.
So you have to be like sharing the same religion as somebody. It can be as simple as saying, on my day of worship, I do this first thing in the morning. Just
Right.
baby step into, or talking about the existence of higher beings or things like that. And then these two are, I think, the ones when you're going between 4 and 5. I think it's these two that may kind of get shuffled out a little bit. So mental intimacy and intellectual intimacy and emotional intimacy, like I feel like they're all kind of interconnected.
Sure.
Okay, so mental intimacy, I think, comes down to talking with people, like just as whether it's politics, it's acknowledging the conversation, it's being like, oh, they just told me something that they value.
Okay.
I should also value it. Like I should also engage that part. I should engage that with them, because I mean, think about it. Like if you were sharing something with somebody, you're like, oh my gosh, Kristen, look at my pet rock. And you're like, you don't even acknowledge that I'm like sharing. You're like, that's cool story, bro.
You should tell that one at parties. Wow. Yeah.
Versus like, do I think you care about my pet rock? I don't. You probably don't. But just enough to be like, oh, thank you for sharing that with me.
Wow, cool. What's your pet's rock's name? Like, where'd you get him? Where does he come from? Where's your rock hail from? Like,
Yeah.
sure.
And then there's intellectual intimacy, which is kind of like a subset of mental intimacy. And that's where you get to have those conversations, like I was mentioning earlier about Bigfoot.
Yeah.
Or like people love to talk about genres of music. Like those are intellectual conversations. Values and things like that. Like those are all intimate, because honestly, I think when we put it in the scope of politics, I feel like if you're talking to somebody about politics, you have to have a pretty intimate relationship with them to not feel the fear of being judged, or otherwise you're just doing it for argument's sake.
Yeah, I was gonna say, and that's a different, you can talk politics with somebody you're not interested with, but it's, or not intimate with, but I think a lot of times it's more to like make a point
Yeah.
than it is to like
Like, yeah,
genuinely try to understand.
yeah. If you're
Yeah.
coming from a place of understanding, that's the intimate part.
Mm-hmm.
And then this one, I resonate with a lot. I mean, I'm just warm and fuzzy this whole time. Let's be real. But this last one, it's experiential intimacy.
That's a big one for me.
Absolutely. I was gonna say
Yeah.
that. I absolutely know that's a big one for you. I can, and I have, and I will travel alone, do things alone, try new things for the first time alone. I absolutely will. But I love it so much more when I have a buddy,
Yeah.
when we're doing the first thing for the first time together, when we're exploring, whatever it is together. I love that so much.
Mm-hmm.
And those things, because when you're doing things like that, I feel like you automatically have to kind of be in a place of vulnerability
Yeah.
to enjoy it.
Mm-hmm.
One of my, I would not consider us to be as close of friends as like me and you, Kristen, or, the handful of friends that I see regularly. But the friend that I went to Moab with, we had never went on a trip together. We'd hung out maybe a couple times outside of work.
Yeah.
We went on this trip together, and it was probably hands down one of the best trips of my life.
Nice.
It was just so good to just, you know,
Just go and be.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Yeah.
so
Experiential is a really big one for me. And it's not even just like going on vacation or, it could be something as simple as trying a new food or experiencing different like phases and parts of life together.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
didn't realize quite so much like how big that could be until there were parts of my life where I realized like there were pieces missing. And I say that in the context of being a step parent. Like I came into this family and the kids were still very young when I married their dad. And so I've been with them since they were itty bitty. But for example, like whether or not my husband and I ever had a kid together, like I feel like we've missed the intimacy of sharing a first pregnancy, like first baby jitters. We've missed the intimacy of, sharing first steps, first words, etc., of the kids that we have now. And you don't think that that would be such a big thing, and it's certainly overcomable. There are millions and millions of families out there who are in similar situations, either because they adopted or because they're step parents or whatever. But it is, you realize how intimate those little experiences in life are too, when you suddenly find yourself in a position where like you didn't have them, if that
yeah.
makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
get that. I do want to focus on physical intimacy real quick,
Oh,
specifically sexual intimacy with a sexual partner. Um, because I feel like when we talk about intimacy, people consider sex to be the most intimate, like PIV, penis and vagina sex, to be the most intimate you can be with a person. And I wholeheartedly disagree.
I do too. It can be emotionless, it can be, thoughtless, it can be.
I guess going back to, I'm probably going to get naked in front of you before I get silly in front of you.
Yeah.
Like, it seems, I don't want to say mechanical. It's just a very biological function, I guess.
Yeah.
And it honestly doesn't even require nudity. Like,
Mm-mm.
so you're not even, I feel like, getting up close and personal to your most personal parts.
Mm-mm.
Like traditional PIV, you're face to face. Like we're face to face right now. I mean, virtually, but you
Right.
know.
Well, and when you think about it too, there are plenty of people out there who are or have worked in the sex industry, for example. If if the pinnacle of intimacy was sexual activity, they'd be so screwed. Like where could they ever fit in intimacy in their personal lives if they were having these incredibly intimate moments multiple times a day, every day? Like if you ask so many of them, and I know people who've worked in the sex industry or in the pornography industry, like it didn't mean anything. It was work. It
Yeah,
wasn't intimate. It wasn't this. It wasn't that. Like it was work.
yeah.
So,
So we've talked about this one, and so I have to bring it up. For me, anytime you are near a part of my body that I am physically incapable of being near, I find that to be much more intimate than any other kind of physical intimacy.
yeah, for sure.
Like, like cunnilingus. The thought of having somebody's head between my thighs
Hmm.
is so much more intimate to me than PIV.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I can't do that. I've never seen myself
From
from the
that
perspective.
angle.
And I never will. It is impossible to. Like I can kind of like pretend and make it up with using some mirrors and stuff.
Sure, but barely. Like,
Yeah, but it's not the same. Like I can never get that close to me.
well, and I
And
feel like for cunnilingus, you also add in some of that vulnerability as well. Like there's always, at least for a lot of women I know, the worry that you smell bad or that you look weird or that, and so when you're intimate enough with somebody that you're able to move past that degree of self-consciousness and just enjoy the moment, that's intimacy.
yeah,
You could
absolutely.
stick your penis in my vagina, but you know what? I own a vibrator. I have
Yeah,
fingers. Like that, it's not.
yeah. And even I actually had a friend. This is kind of similar, kind of not similar. Um, I have a friend who was talking about when somebody's really close to you for the first time.
Mm,
So, like when you are like, like inches away, and how you can see all of the person's like pores and
yeah.
and which isn't something that you always necessarily see. Like you're never that close to other people.
Mm-mm, it's true.
I, she said out loud, like, "Oh, you're so close, you can see my blemishes." And it's like, yeah, that is really close. I can't get like, you know,
Unless I'm nose to a mirror, like what am I gonna do?
yeah. So even something as simple as that, like, like I may look good standing like this far away from you,
Hmm.
but if I get like up close, like it's a different ball game.
But it's funny because I think some people too would be like, oh, intimacy is like letting each other pop each other's pimples.
Yeah.
Or like being excited to pop somebody's pimples. Like anytime my husband has one, I'm like, come here, let me get it, right?
Why is that the best?
I
It's
don't know.
the
But just random people on the street, or if I don't know you well, like gross. I don't want to come near your pimple. Like that's disgusting. Like that's intimacy.
yeah, you're right. You're right. Um
Keep your dirty, poor volcano away from me, unless I'm intimate. In which case, come here, let me pop it for you.
come here, please.
Here, right now. Let's go. Come on, guys. Mm.
Oh, right. And as I'm back here cackling, I actually asked a few of my friends what they thought was intimate. And, kind of along with the usual stuff, um, I also had some people say things like just recognizing the other person.
Yeah.
So, like being able to hear them laugh from a different part of the house and being like,
Yeah.
oh,
Picking them
that's,
out of a crowd.
yeah. Or knowing their mannerisms, and being able to be like, oh, you always do this.
Mm-hmm.
That's a pretty solid type of emotional intimacy, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And just recognizing those things in others, right? Emotional intimacy.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say that. I don't know. I'll be honest, I'm not an intimacy expert. Like, for the longest time, I was worried I was like on the autism spectrum because my ability to be intimate was pretty limited. But turns out I'm just ADHD, so don't worry.
Turns out your kinds of intimacy
It's
are
just
just
different than others.
it's fine.
Hence the beauty of intimacy. When you find somebody whose brand of intimacy works well with your own, that's a
Here we
beautiful
go.
thing.
I think that's actually a little bit, I don't know what it stems from, I guess. I feel like it's been a longer term thing than that. But I think the reason I find being silly so intimate is because people don't always get when I'm being silly.
Mm,
So I've definitely made like jokes and been silly and been goofy, and it's like fallen flat.
just crickets.
People are like, huh? And for the longest time, I'm actually realizing this now as I'm saying it. For the longest time, I would say that if I can't make you laugh, then we're not going to be able to be friends. But I don't think I'm a funny person. So I think it's that piece there, is that if you can catch me being silly enough that it makes you at least chuckle, that's the sweet spot.
That's fair. Yeah. Because see, I think you're funny as hell. Like, we shared plenty of laughs.
I love it. I got her, guys.
Yeah. 1 point.
So, for anybody watching, do you have any recommendations if somebody's looking to be more intimate with their friends or their partners or their family members? Because it's all the way around. Is there anything specifically that you would recommend to them?
I think the first and foremost is to learn how to be vulnerable around the people that you want to be intimate with. And your vulnerability may be different than other people's. So that's going to mean something very different to you than it's going to mean to me, than it's going to mean to Michelle. But be vulnerable. And part of that is going to involve opening yourself up enough to have the conversation of what does intimacy look like to you. And sometimes those are things that you can kind of innately know about a person. And sometimes those are things that you're going to have to talk about, depending on how different your personalities are. But be vulnerable and let your guard down. And then from there, it really just depends on the other person that you're with, I think, like if it was with you, I would work really hard on physical closeness because that is the thing for you. And I very much am not a physically close person. Like if I touch you in any way, shape, or form, we are like this because I avoid most people like the plague. I cling to my husband like a sloth. Like if he could just wear me around like a backpack all the time, I'd be fine. But like anybody else, if you're in my bubble, like you need to back up about 5 feet. So if I've ever like held your hand, touched your shoulder, given you a hug, or sat closer than 5 feet away from you, like we're really good.
this is so silly, but I feel like I remember the first time that we had a moment like that,
Oh, really?
and it was when we were tubing
Okay.
the first time, because I told you to be safe, you had to trust me and hold my hand, and I would guide us down the river. And you told me that you hated holding hands because you have sweaty palms.
That's exactly it too. Yeah.
And but you would do it with me.
Yep.
Get us down the river.
And that's where it all began. That was our introduction into intimacy.
Oh, um, that's actually so that's one thing that I'm actually working on myself, because and I think this might also be a neurodivergent thing, is that I'm hyper aware of not making people uncomfortable, because I don't actually know when I'm making people uncomfortable. So I have to like be very specific about what I do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like I logically know that like this friend doesn't like hugs, this friend doesn't like hugs, this friend doesn't like hugs. And so I am like, okay, well, if they don't like hugs, then I don't want to put them in a position where they feel uncomfortable by me hugging them. So then, therefore, I don't give hugs.
Hmm.
People, or, as I've gotten older, it's actually become a big problem for me because I feel like I've lost myself in the space of not being as physically touchy with my relationships as I want to be.
Mm.
Because I think like I grab onto those moments where people are like, yeah, I don't like hugs. And it doesn't necessarily mean they mind giving me a hug, but I've grasped onto that.
I see. Yeah.
So that's something I'm actually actively trying to work on, is getting over that hump and letting myself just be myself,
Yeah.
which requires vulnerability,
Hmm.
because nobody wants to be like rejected from a hug. Like that's worse.
Fair.
Like,
No, thank you. No, thank you. Stay back
so
there. Thank you.
yeah, so that's what I'm working on. And and that's one of those things that you can do with friends too. Like, physical touch doesn't have to be saved for your romantic
Oh, no,
relationships.
not at all.
Like, it doesn't. Touch isn't sexual in nature.
Mm-mm.
Touch is definitely a thing.
And
Um,
an important thing, I think.
yeah, like I think that's what we're lacking in a lot of our relationships, and that's personal to me. I feel pretty strongly about that. Is that we save these specific things for this specific relationship, but when they're not being fulfilled in that relationship, instead of being like, oh, I'm gonna go snuggle with my best friend, we just deprive ourselves of it, and then we're miserable.
Well, there's people now that I don't know. I've seen documentaries on people who are like professional snugglers. Like that's how deprived some of us are, is like people will pay money to just go and snuggle for an hour with a stranger because they're not getting that anywhere else. Which isn't to say that's not what everybody needs, but I mean, I'm very different from you in the physical touch department. Like almost vastly opposite ends of the spectrum. But even for me in that situation, like I know that you're a pretty touchy-feely person, and I know that you like to do things like give hugs. And so it is just as intimate as it is for you to be able to give those things. It is just as intimate for me to be willing to work on receiving them. Like
Yeah,
that in and of itself is a way to build intimacy together, is to find ways to be comfortable with each other's intimacies, even when it's not like by default your own. So
Yeah.
I'm more intimate with people who I've gotten comfortable letting touch me than with other people. So
Yeah.
then it becomes an intimacy thing for me, even though it's not one of my intimacy things.
Yeah. And I think that also, comes down to the 5 love languages,
Mm-hmm.
because showing other people you love them is essentially forming a closeness, which is forming intimacy. When you are understanding what the relationship needs, and you're willing to put that in itself is going to harbor the closeness. It's going to harbor the safeness.
Yeah,
So, I think that's all along those lines that, you it's a relationship. Like, it just comes down to it. Like, you want to foster that closeness with the people in your life.
absolutely.
Um, so that, comes down to active listening also.
Very much.
Uh,
Yeah.
I feel like, Kristen, you've been a really active listener this podcast, because I feel like you're like, oh, Michelle needs a good snuggle.
I can't snuggle you, so I'm gonna very actively listen to you. I'm gonna nod my head. I'm gonna say, oh yes, really? Okay. Wow, yes, I agree. Michelle, what a good point you make.
Get 4 feet away from you next time you come over.
I'm gonna give you a little verbal hug.
I don't know how much I like that.
Verbal hug.
Um,
And that
so
will get deleted. I don't know what that was.
blooper reel.
Super real. Not intimate enough with this crowd yet to let them say make on like that.
Want to see the inside of my mouth, guys? Um, so as far as spirituality goes, if that's something that you want to create intimacy with, um, we've I just feel so warm and fuzzy. I know I've said that multiple times, but I feel like I need to keep bringing up examples of our own friendship.
I mean, I'm not mad about it. I feel like I'm the most awkward human on the planet. So the more people are like, let me share these times that like I have really like warm, fuzzy feelings about. I'm like, you okay.
I'm doing okay.
I'm not broken. Okay.
So I know I've shared my spirituality with you,
Yeah.
which is hard for me to do because people don't understand it. People get really up in arms about it. I don't want to go too much into it now, for those same reasons. Surprise.
Well, it's hard to be intimate with strangers. Now, hopefully,
Yeah.
we will all be intimate one day together, but that sounded like an orgy. That's not what I wanted. We'll be emotionally closer one day. Anyway.
So yeah. So I remember you were keeping me company while I was unpacking some of my like spiritual tools.
Your little shelf. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah. And it was so nice to be able to open up to somebody about like the inner workings of, these certain things.
Hmm.
It's not something that I get to do with everybody.
Well, it goes back to even like spiritual intimacy. Like, I don't think you and I share the same spirituality, but I mean, we can still share those things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it was fascinating to learn about, and I feel much closer to you now that I have a better understanding of those intricacies of the things that you follow and the things that you believe, and it helps us be able to like ever since anytime certain times of the year roll around, I automatically think of you and I'm like, oh, this would be such a fun tradition to bring into my house, like you know
Yeah.
and I'm my husband and I, our spiritual bonding is that we're really not like we're both very secular, very atheistic. Like we both are, and we always have been. But we just love to learn, we love to learn about all these other different things. And so it was wonderful. Like it was so good. I will sit and listen to you unpack those things all day, any day. Like invite me over for your traditions. I'll sit in the background and watch. Like I'll sit 2 feet away from you
There we go. Ooh.
and participate.
Well, and I think this one, in I guess the same but opposite regard, is you're engaging in those discussions, and they're deep discussions,
Oh yeah.
like the universe, the just existence of man, like anthropology is like a bonding trait for you and your husband.
Very much. And me and anybody else. That's the intellectual thing. Like if you'll sit and let me talk anthropology with you for 15 minutes, like we're gonna be besties.
Yeah. So those deep discussions, and it doesn't, it can be super deep about something, or it can be not so super deep about something you love. Like, just creating those spaces for discussions, and willing to be involved in the discussion.
Yeah.
Like, even if it's something that doesn't interest you, just being interested in the person who's giving you the information, like, that speaks volumes.
It does. It really does. I agree. What a
And then,
fascinating thing.
say that again?
So what a fascinating thing, intimacy.
It is. So one of the things that an article I was reading about spoke of was how it's really hard for us to parse out what makes a romantic relationship a romantic relationship, because we can be intimate with our friends, we can be intimate with our family, we can be, intimate with a significant other in all pretty much the same way.
Right.
And you would think, and this is the point that the article is making, is that sexual activity would push it over into the romantic spectrum. But when you take into account asexual romantic relationships,
Mm-hmm.
take into account friends with benefits, I don't understand friends with benefits, because if I'm getting the benefits and I'm also friends with you, what else is there?
That is true. What defines that then?
Yeah, that was
Is it just a different feeling?
that would be my best guess, honestly.
That's fascinating. I'm now scared that I suddenly don't understand like romantic versus intimate relationships though.
This has always been, and this is, for me, I kind of treat all of my friends in ways that I treat a significant other,
Mm-hmm.
in such that I will reorganize my schedule for somebody. I will take off work for somebody.
Right.
Like all of those like bigger things, I absolutely will do for my friends. And so for me, it's like, it's really hard for me to tell. Like,
I wonder if it's just like the ultimate state of intimacy. Like I
maybe.
have friends who I'm like not sexually active with, but like physically intimate with, who I'll hug and hold hands with. I have friends who I'm emotionally intimate with. I have friends that I'm mentally intimate with. I have friends that I'm spiritually intimate with. I have friends that I'm like experientially intimate with. But the only person that I am all of those intimacies with is my romantic partner. Like maybe it's just the person that you have in your life that you share the most number of intimacies with.
Yeah, just the epitome of intimacy.
Yeah. Because I'll be honest, I don't think like of the 5 recognized types that we were talking about, I don't think that I share all 5 of those with any one person. Like maybe little bits here and there, but not like fully.
Yeah. Yeah.
Except my husband. Like he gets more of that than anybody else currently does.
Maybe, yeah, maybe you're onto something. Maybe that's what it is just the volume of the intimacy that you have with a person.
Because then you have to figure, like, if you suddenly lose that volume with somebody that you're romantically with, like, you're probably not going to continue to be, they're not going to be your romantic partner. Like, you'll probably move on to somebody else who you share more of those things with.
Yeah.
Because that's like the healthy relationship, right? Huh. I don't know.
Okay, so before we move on to our next segment, just a couple last things about, exploring your intimacy with your partners and your relationship and your relationships. Um, try new things together, plan activities together. Me and Kristen are trying to go to New Mexico for a trip.
Carlsbad.
Yes. And, you know, allow yourself to just have fun with somebody else. And then focus on what's going right when it's going right. So there's always something going right. And even when it seems like there's not, there is.
Yeah.
So, if everything with your spouse has just blown up today and then they bring you ice cream after work, focus on the ice cream. Try to focus on what's right, what's going well, expand on that. Everything else, you'll deal with it, but try to focus on what's good. Happy.
One of the most intimate things my husband ever did for me was
Hmm.
I'd had a really long day and like a really long night, and then I just started another really long day, and he showed up at my work and he's like, "Hey, come meet me outside really quick. I brought you a snack." And he met me outside, and instead of giving me like flowers or chocolate or like something like that, he brought me a bag full of Qdoba tortillas and a bottle of Cholula hot sauce, because one of my favorite stupid snacks are Qdoba tortillas with Cholula inside. That's intimacy. Be the guy with the Qdoba tortillas.
Everybody wants the guy with the Qdoba.
Everybody wants the guy with the Qdoba tortillas. So romantic. He was like, "I was going to bring you flowers." He's like, "But I know you and you don't like flowers, so I brought you some Qdoba tortillas instead." And I was like, "It's the most meaningful gift anyone's ever given me." Thank you. It was great.
I aspire to greatness.
Perfect. And now we're married. So
my last thought is that with Lulu, with my van life, I'm hoping to harbor some of that intimacy all around the country, if that makes, because I feel like I'm missing that connection with a lot of people.
mm-hmm.
Hoping that through this process we can all kind of grow together and find those things. Just like you, experiential intimacy is a big deal for me. So
I hear that.
So that's my words of advice, our sage words today. Hopefully you found it helpful.
Thank you, old lady sage. Yeah, hopefully we helped you be just a little bit more intimate or a little more confused about intimacy. That's obviously just as obvious. You know what I just noticed? I've been wearing these leggings all day. And the entire time I've been in them, I've been working, and I'm like, you know what? I swear these leggings had pockets. I don't know why, but I thought these leggings had pockets in them. And then I was like, clearly I have 900 pairs of leggings. Like clearly I'm thinking about another pair of leggings. Your girl put them on inside out. Turns out there are pockets. They're just on the inside of my pants. So that's what's been racing through my mind for the duration of this recording. I just realized I was sitting here staring at the seam and I was like,
yeah,
that's the way those are supposed to go. And now all of us are a little bit more intimate because I've shared that vulnerability with you.
That's the intimacy we hope to achieve.
Exactly.
Not
But
the
guess
origin.
what?
What?
If we've finished discussing intimacy, where does that leave us? What's next?
What's next? That's gonna be
news. Sex in the news. Are you excited?
So great. I'm excited. I'm always excited. This is my favorite. And you are doing it today. And I'm so excited to hear what you had to say.
So for anybody who is just joining us, Sex in the News is just a fun segment that we like to do at the end of every podcast, where one of us will pick a news article that has something to do with sex, the topic of sex, sex ed, etc. We don't tell the other person what the article is about or even the title of the article until we're filming. So she never knows what I'm going to talk about. I never know what she's going to talk about. Sometimes they're funny, sometimes they're sad, sometimes they're a little bit anger inducing. This one, my friend, I found a little anger inducing.
Okay.
So, and it's very relevant to our podcast and what it is that we're trying to do with it. So this article comes from CNN.
Okay.
It's from July 23rd. I've had this saved on my phone. It was published July 23rd, so very recently. The day of filming, it's August 4th, so not very long ago. The title of this article is Florida School Board Rejects New Sex Ed Textbooks. Here's the basic gist of this. So you know that relatively recently Florida passed the Don't Say Gay bill, which that's an episode in and of itself. Don't even get me started. But apparently, the board of Florida's largest school district just rejected new sex ed textbooks that it had formerly approved. It had approved them about 3 months ago. It rejected them in a 5-4 vote in the Miami-Dade County on Wednesday, this past Wednesday, and it has completely left all of the students in that school district without a sex ed curriculum.
Great.
Yeah, which is super gay, super great, not super gay. I'm sorry, I don't know why that came out. I was thinking about the Don't Say Gay law. Super great.
Now we have to make sure we do say it.
I know, gay. Jeez Louise. But yeah, the decision came pretty much right on the heels of the Don't Say Gay bill, because that was what 3-4 months ago that they did that, where they said that they were going to ban certain instruction about like sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, that it's a whole thing. But the textbooks that they cut, the ones that they disproved, covered everything from pregnancy prevention, understanding sexuality, sexually transmitted diseases, safe sex, drugs and alcohol, and intimate relationships. So,
Florida, what are you doing?
Yeah, which sucks because it was back in April, I think, that they had approved them for middle and high school students. It was part of like their, what do they call it? Let me see. Their comprehensive health skills textbook. And then this week, the board went back and rejected them. So.
Okay, so if you're from Florida, I want you to get in real close. Come here. If you're from Florida, we are here for you. You come talk to Aunt Becky. You come talk
to Mama Keeks.
We're here to guide you and support you and provide you with sex education because you are clearly not getting it in school.
Yep.
So we love you. Take care. I don't know what's wrong with the rest of the state, but we're here for you.
They are slowly but surely doing what they can to take away the rights of people to, public education based on facts and science and just the realities of life. So that is exactly the kind of higher up decision that makes podcasts like this necessary. And as much as we love doing it, it sucks that we have to at all. You guys should have every right to comprehensive sexual education, and that 100% should involve everything from safe sex to gender to sex, to sexual orientation. It all counts and it is all important. And just because a school board said that it is not, keep fighting for it. Keep teaching where you can teach. If you have resources, share them below, send us emails, whatever you need to do, but burn it to the fucking ground, guys. You deserve better than this. So
I long for a world where what we're talking about is just standard, where we don't have to be like a niche podcast.
Right? They'll be like, we don't need this. We've heard this 7,000 times.
Yeah, like old news,
Old news.
We are. Wish we were, but.
So yeah, that was my sex in the news, and it was a bit of a downer, and I'm sorry, but it's relevant to the podcast and it's relevant to why we do the podcast, and it needed to be out there. So
yeah, thanks
good job,
for sharing.
Florida.
Yeah, Florida. And it sucks because that it's not the people who are needing it who are voting it down.
Oh no.
Like, it's people who are far removed from needing sex education.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
Well, it just makes me feel good that we're doing this and we're here, right?
Me too. And we mean it. Please reach out to us anyway. Anytime.
Absolutely. And ask us your questions. We're here. So I guess with that, like I said, thanks for bringing that to the table. Good to keep up with the news.
Always.
Don't forget, these things matter. Believe me, they do. So I guess that'll wrap us up for today. I loved having this conversation. I loved sharing some of our memories. That was a lot of fun.
That was a lot of fun.
A little unexpected, I think. I wasn't really planning on that, but
it worked.
Yeah, it worked. Okay, so that brings us to our end. If you thought we were funny, found us interesting, if you like sex, hate sex, if you're a teacher, if you're a student, if you think we're cute, if you think we're funny, if you think we sound sexy, or you're just bored and need some entertainment, button, share, subscribe. Not Your Mother's Sex Ed, we are here for you. And if you would like us to answer any of your questions, or if there's something specific you want us to talk about, please email us. Our email is notyourmotherssexedpod@gmail.com. So notyourmotherssexedpod@gmail.com. We absolutely want to hear from you, so send us a line. And then if you're still watching, don't forget to check out some of our other short series. Those alternate, and it is Mama Keek Says, and then that's hosted by Kristen, and I host Learning Stuff with Becky, and they're just real short clips, so tune in for those two in between your podcasts. And with that, that's it for today. Thanks for joining us.
We love you.
Thank you.